السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولي الصالحين وأشهد أن محمدا عبد رسول. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear brothers and sisters, welcome to another live broadcast, another special episode of the Mental Health Podcast. And I'm excited. Today is going to be an amazing topic. We have, as always, an amazing thing to cover, and we want to take your questions as well, as always. But I'm joined with my co-host, Dr. Abu Isa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. How are you doing, bro?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Another exciting podcast, akhi, tonight, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah.
Let's get straight into it. But before that, I want to introduce Brother Michael Abraham. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah. Jazakumullah khairan for having me. Happy to be here with you, brothers.
Barakallah fiqh. For those who don't know Michael Abraham, again,
yeah.
you can check out his Instagram and his YouTube, Abraham Education. MashaAllah, he's doing a lot of amazing work from Minnesota, being involved with the schools, their public schools. He is an educational expert, and he is currently running a parenting course that you want to check out. Check out my followers and the people that I follow on my Instagram. Inshallah, you can get my stories as well that I've shared his course. So tonight, inshallah, we're going to be talking about a very controversial topic, yet it's something that parents have asked over and over and over again. How do we open up the discussion with our children when it comes to these very taboo topics, such as pornography, masturbation, LGBTQ? Right now, this June, astaghfirullah, the month that I was born in, they had to choose, this month. How do we open this? And how is this linked to our podcast, Mental Health Podcast, where last time when we invited, we had our podcast, we invited Brother Abraham, Michael Abraham, to join us. It was because someone asked on our live show, how do I talk to my children about these things? How do I open up? How do I raise awareness? And we were talking about porn and masturbation and how that affects mental health. And Dr. Abu Isa was giving us some of the science behind it. And that's how we got into it. So tonight we're going to tackle that, and we want to take your questions as well. But yesterday, I want to start with this. Yesterday I received a question, and I had to make a video about it to address it. And it was from a concerned mother. And the mother literally said that, like, my daughter has fallen into this, SSA, same-sex attraction. She's 14. I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. I'm crying. She's my only daughter. I love her to death. And she's telling me, she's attracted to girls. And how do I talk? What do I do? What do I say to her? How do I talk to her? And, it's a very sensitive and delicate thing, because first of all, this is probably not the first time this has popped into her mind. And second of all, I've always say preemptive measures, education is they're very more effective than damage control. It's very difficult for parents to wake up and say, look at what's happening to my daughter. Look at what's happening to my son. My children have done this or have done that, or I've caught them watching porn, or I've caught them being involved in these LGBTQ activities. What should I do now? And a lot of times as counselors, it's very difficult to give them here's your solution. It's so simple. Just do this and everything will be fine. It's not so simple. So let us then focus and spend time on preemptive measures, on education. Brother Michael Abraham, let's start with you, Akhi. Tell us a little bit about your work and why is it important, and then we'll get into the whole topic of how to address some of these issues.
And Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon everyone out there. Hope you're doing well. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, as a brother said, my name is Michael Abraham. I'm in the state of Minnesota. I'm a public school teacher here. I also work as an educational consultant. I created a public school educator training program that I also wrote into a book called Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools. You can find that on my website, abrahameducation.com. You can check out my YouTube, Abraham Education. Instagram's Abraham_education. If you know a non-Muslim educator who teaches Muslim kids, or you had you went to a school formally in the United States or in the West or somewhere, please refer them to those resources, because all these issues that we have so much anxiety about, something that makes it so much worse is we stay cocooned about them. The youth, something we have to talk about here, something you'll never get away with. You'll never get away from with youth. Talking to youth, nurturing youth is 100% an actions speak louder than words business. There's nothing you'll ever read about parenting, about teaching, or anything that you'll see in the deen that will allow you to get away with that. Our Muslim kids in the West especially, they see the actions that adults communicate to them is that, we keep Islam hidden, we keep our Muslim identity hidden. So that doesn't give them anything to work with as far as how they are supposed to get by and how they are supposed to interact in society in general and in the discourse of society. So it opens up, it's just one of the things that opens up other avenues for them to get caught up into. And there's so many different avenues available to kids with the digital media. So I've taught K through 12 for 12 years. I've taught every grade except kindergarten and second grade, half in elementary, second half in middle and high school. So I have a lot of experience with kids. I'm going to be running a parenting course on my YouTube channel, as the brother said, starting next Saturday, Abraham Education, to try to help this generational transition that is going on. Because as I see it, a lot of the Muslim parenting, it's based on cultural norms from the past, basically. And, when you have a culture that's more unified in its values and it's more isolated and it has customs in place that can put kids on a different path, that allows you to parent in a certain way where you can get by without addressing certain things, because there's going to be a level of protection over the kids. And there's also going to be a degree to which everyone in the society is reinforcing the same thing. So it becomes a way for young people, they just fit into the expectations there. And there's not so much conflict. In the globalized world and the transitions that Muslim families are going through, whether they've immigrated to the West or they're in the Muslim world and it's just becoming more, integrated in the age of communication, those things are going to backfire. They're going to backfire in a big way. So, so these issues, they do need to be addressed from a very young age, as Gabriel was saying. And I mean, we can talk about how to do it. I mean, and like you were saying, we always hear about issues when, something really bad has gone on, something that is kind of now visible for the parent and maybe visible for others. Then they start getting panicked with it. And sometimes the actions of that, what it sends to the kid is, well, you only care about what I'm doing once you're concerned about other people seeing it, this type of thing. So, for people in those situations, I'll dig into that in my course as well. We can dig into it here. But a lot of undoing those difficult situations where the children are older, it has to begin with apologizing to them for what you didn't do in the past or what you didn't know in the past. And kids will be forgiving to you. Some parents, they have this mental block, like if I apologize to the kid, it's going to show weakness, that's going to ruin my authority. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. That helps younger kids empathize with you. And younger people, they have a harder time empathizing with older people than older people have with younger people, because younger people have never been older people. Older people, they actually are disconnected from what it was like when I was a kid, usually, if they don't take time to reflect on that. They don't take time to read about it and learn about it and think about it. But you do in your long-term memory somewhere have your experience of your childhood back there, and you can access it if you take time to think back and reflect on it. But, a young person, they have nothing to draw on from what an experience of an adult is like. So, if we apologize for things that we haven't done with our kids, that's usually the beginning place with those types of situations, in my opinion, because that humanizes you to the kid a little bit more. And that starts bringing the connection back. And the reality is, you have a 14-year-old girl in that type of situation. Somewhere along the line, the connection was not built well enough with the parents, and she sought a connection somewhere else, usually at that age, probably through some route that her peers gave you. There is all kinds of negative health aspects to kids who are more peer-oriented versus parenting-oriented. But if in the modern world, if kids are not parented well in a proactive way with wisdom which will come from the Quran and the Sunnah, if they're not parented in that way, and you're set up to be that way if you just follow your old cultural ways of parenting, then it's likely that kids are going to become more pure oriented when they grow up. And this is happening all over the place with Muslim kids, all over the place with Muslim kids. They're not really feeling, there's varying degrees of which they care about their parents, obviously, but many of them, they're more invested in these adolescent years in what peers think. So that's a foundational problem with that type of issue. How do you talk to a kid about, pornography, LGBT, all that type of stuff? You need to lay a foundation when they're very young about what is natural. And you have to lay a foundation when they're young that is going to keep their fitra in place, because their fitra is going to be challenged. Now, it's not uncommon. It's pretty natural for a young person, say age 4 or 5, even as young as 3 in some kids, certainly by age 6, they will wonder to themselves, where do babies come from? Especially if they have seen a pregnant woman in their life and they have little siblings. That's very natural. And they usually will ask their parents at that age. They usually still feel connected. And, so it's common in a lot of Muslim cultures that when that question comes up, or a question that's similar, it gets shut down. And maybe the traditional cultural way of doing it is to shut that question down, say that's aib or it's whatever, and we don't want to talk about it. Doing that, again, if you have a enclaved, protected traditional culture where everyone's on the same page, you can do that, and it's not going to lead the kid down a wrong path, inshallah. They're going to, because just the societal pressures themselves won't compete with what you're trying to do with them. But the kids in the modern world, they're going to grow up in a way where we're competing for them. We're competing for their hearts and minds. So when this question comes up at a young age, it is actually a very valuable learning opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of. And it's an opportunity to set a framework for the child's understanding of what is natural and what is right and wrong in the world, that then can be reiterated through their life as these things come up. Bismillah.
MashaAllah.
I can keep talking. I can keep talking if you want about how to do this.
I have a question for Dr. Abu Isa. Last time we were talking about, pornography, obviously, and that's one of the things that I want to focus on, because our clients ask us, how do I talk to my kids about porn and masturbation? Things that are related to, as you said, the fitra. Like a lot of people, they'll label that as, okay, it's haram. Of course, we know it's haram. But the question is, where does the curiosity come from when it comes to issues that are related to intimacy? As Brother Michael Abraham said, children have that natural inclination as young as 3. They see their mothers being pregnant. They have siblings. They want to understand, where does the baby come from? And so on and so forth. So when a child asks or a parent, a child is engaged in such activities where it's too late sometimes, the parent has to think about it. Where did the disconnect happen? So my question for Dr. Abu Isa is, we see that a lot of young boys and girls are inclined towards a peer education, as Brother Michael Abraham was saying, as opposed to parenting. But we also see that a lot of them do struggle with this. It's not that it's just it's on autopilot, everything works out well. A lot of young men and women have mental health issues due to the cognitive dissonance between their ethics and what they believe, what they've been taught, and their feelings and emotions and what they're learning from their peers. And I see that this is increasing, actually, because a lot of people think that, you just kind of give into your fitra or to your shahawat and desires, and everything is fine. It's not like that. There's a huge battle that's taking place within our youth today, Gen Z, whatever you want to call it. And it does affect mental health. There's a lot of people who are doing self-harm. There's a lot of people who are committing suicide. We see, I was reading an article, especially in the LGBTQ community, suicide rates are high. People think that they're happy, they're gay. They're not so happy, actually. and
that, sorry to interrupt, that community, they actually weaponize those statistics against people. It's kind of a side issue, but they do that.
Really?
Because I tell people in public schools, there's a lot of worry about it and stuff. And in America, it's really not predictable what you're going to get from school to school. But an area to be fairly concerned about is with counseling because, the guidance that counselors get these days, which is rooted in Gleason, like the main activist group for that stuff in the school system here in America, as well as the APA a little bit, some things they've put together, is that if a child comes and expresses that they identify that way to a school counselor, you shouldn't tell their parents, because that might be a suicide risk for them. That's the reasoning that they will use. So, we need people, and we need people who are in the mental health field to analyze some of this stuff and critique it. And also, give instructions on how it should be interpreted when that child is from a Muslim family. Because there's other things in these fields that give a lot of credence to the fact that treatment for them needs to be culturally relevant. And there's a dearth of that. And there's a dearth of resources for Muslims. Sorry to interrupt.
Dr. Abu Isa.
It's okay. Jazakallah khair. There's a lot to unpack there. I think first thing, I would advocate for proactive parenting rather than reactive parenting. So we get a lot of discussions and referrals, and we're seeing parents complaining or really upset because, like you mentioned, the 14-year-old girl with SSA, or young people who are abusing substances, and the parents find out. So I think we need to kind of reframe the conversation and education, and alhamdulillah, Michael is doing good work on that. As parents, we need to be proactive, and within kind of developmental psychology and psychiatry, we have something called the modeling theory. So this is very well recognized that young people, they learn in terms of behavior change, cognition, emotional states through observation and through modeling. And so what is the home environment like? So if you kind of track back and do a timeline with majority, not all, but with majority of these kind of difficult, challenging cases, you would find usually an absent father. Maybe he's too busy, earning money, busy with his business. Maybe a mother who's overwhelmed with a large number of children, and there's an imbalance within the home and neglect, which leads to a lot of the youth kind of going astray. So we have to be role models. Parents should be role models. I mean, when I was in the UK, both in Newcastle and in Manchester, I saw when I used to go for Salah to the masjid, parents would be dropping their kids for Quran class, for halaqah, and they would just leave. So the parents are dropping their children at the time of Salah and leaving. So obviously they're not praying Salah in the masjid, So so that creates this cognitive dissonance. Like, if my parents are not proud of their identity as Muslims, as practicing Muslims, then that creates an issue with the children, because they're getting their dawa from their friends. And I see this a lot in mental health and addiction, that a lot of the times that young people, they talk about lack of parental supervision, kind of not really very good communication with their parents, which then causes them to seek answers elsewhere. And like we discussed in the last episode, Gabriel, that our youth are under attack kind of from all angles, through the media, social media, education system. So we need to be the ones that they come to if they have any concerns, and we need to be in a very compassionate, supportive manner, advise them. But obviously, if there's a communication gap, then that's going to cause a big issue for these people. To answer about kind of the whole LGBTQ thing, I'll tell you, because I like to tell kind of personal experiences, because it gives more power and it affects people. So I went to a conference in Australia in 2017. It was a mental health conference in Adelaide, and one of the sessions was on kind of gender dysphoria and gender reassignment surgery. So I was interested. I thought I'd go and attend this session. And subhanallah, the two presenters, one was a psychiatrist, a female psychiatrist, and then another was a barrister who used to be a man and was now a woman. And she or he or it came kind of wearing high heels, short skirt, and astaghfirullah, it was very disturbing. Anyway, the session was even more disturbing, because what they were saying was, this was back in 2017. They were saying that they were really pushing hard this agenda around LGBTQ, XYZ, whatever they want to add on at the end of that, and about gender reassignment. So they gave examples of 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds saying, I'm a boy, but I'm a girl, or I'm a girl and I want to be a boy. And then they were giving them hormone therapy to delay puberty as a process to go on to gender reassignment. So imagine 6, 7, 8-year-old children. And subhanAllah, like every case that they mentioned, there was atypical development in terms of there was trauma, depression, anxiety, parental substance use, domestic violence. There was no case that they described with normal kind of upbringing. And kind of, I did challenge that, but it's really scary because the audience were all psychiatrists, mental health professionals, and they were like very supportive of this agenda. And I still remember what this barrister said in the session. What he or she, I don't know what to say, said that basically we are advocating for the rights of the child. And I'm very proud to say this is what he was saying or she was saying, that we've not lost a single case. And they mentioned that in court, parents had objected to their children, 7-year-old kids, being given hormone replacement, and the judge had kind of given a ruling in favor of the mental health services and the child. So they were being given these treatments against the will of the parents. So that just shows you the power dynamics. This was back in 2017, and now we're in 2022, and we all know what's going on now.
Yeah, mashallah. I would like our audience or anyone to look into Walt Heyer, who went through gender reassignment, and he's an advocate now speaking against it, and he calls it trauma.
Yeah.
And he talks about his experience as a young child and the lack of parenting. And just to put in simple words, he says, at that age, I didn't know better. It was my parents' responsibility to kind of tell me this is wrong. Don't do it. Don't wear girls' skirts and whatnot. And he was talking about how his grandma was making skirts for him and playing. A lot of people don't understand how much your lack of parenting or your mistakes in parenting can affect the child. Sadly, even Muslim parents sometimes joke or play around with their boys. For example, you should have been a girl. They grow their hair. They almost feminize them in a sense. And with their girls, and they think it's funny. They think it's cute.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the impact that it can have on someone. So Walt Heyer is an amazing speaker, I would say. He's a great advocate against gender reassignment, and he calls it dhulm. He calls it really like oppression and trauma. But let me get back to Michael. Brother Michael, there's a question here from Brother Almir, and he says, so Salam, how soon should parents be talking to their children about these issues, these problems and issues? What do you think?
So look, again, that question about where babies come from, that is something that should come up in a child early in childhood. Okay, like age 4, so age 3 with some kids. 5 or 6, I think you're going to get it. Now, parenting's like anything else. You have to have a good foundation laid. A lot of physical affection for kids when they are very, very young with both parents is very, very important for this. And trying to maintain that actually as long as you can in life so they connect physical affection with you. And that creates so much psychological and neurological comfort with you when you have a lot of that. So, a lack of that is the only thing I can really think of that would make a kid not open enough at that young age to ask their parent when they're curious about something. Because, that's the first place they're going to go. For some children, it's that question where they are first shut down from a parent when they're curious about something. Now, what does that sub-communicate to the child? It communicates to the child that as your parent, if you're curious about something, you can't come to me to get the answer. If you're curious about something, I'm going to shy away from answering it for you. So then as they're continually curious about things as they grow up, what you've communicated to them with your actions is don't come to me for it. So naturally, they're going to go somewhere else. So this is actually something really crucial when kids are young. And a parent who did shut down a kid like that, who's now having a problem, especially if they're now having a problem with age or not, if you communicate in adolescence, you should apologize to your kid. Write them a letter if you don't know how to do it. That's to me, that's the beginning place of unraveling these things when they're older. Now, when a kid asks that question, the other thing you have to model for your kid is honesty. Because if you're dishonest and they come to realize that later in life, again, what you've communicated to them that you can't trust me to tell you the truth when you ask something. Now, look, answering that question, where do babies come from? A great way that young people learn. And we know this from the Quran, we know this from Islam. A great way that young people learn, all people learn, especially when you're trying to articulate bigger concepts, is through metaphors. Concrete metaphors where you take something concrete to illustrate something more abstract. So when a child asks you about where do babies come from when you are young, you can create a metaphor between how a plant grows and the seed is planted in the ground. And then it needs water to nurture and all this type of thing. And you say to the child, just like a plant grows by having a seed planted in the ground, a child grows inside a woman first by having a seed planted in her by her husband. That's how you first say it. You know, and even in the Quran, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he refers to the women as harith, which is like, you know, they translate it as like a tilth. Okay, tilled land.
Yeah.
I mean, you can extend this metaphor out. So you know, a plant grows better when the soil is protected and well taken care of. So for a baby to grow both inside a woman and afterwards, it's important that both the woman and the man are well protected and well taken care of. And now if the child asks, well, how does the man plant the seed inside her? You know, if the child's maybe as young as 4 or 5, there's a degree to which you can maybe say, well, you'll understand that more when you're older. You know, maybe at those younger ages, you can say that, and then it's going to come up later. You know, you can say, even I'd say as young as 4, certainly 5, 6, 7, they are going to have a concept of their private parts. They're going to know that special attention and special guardianship is given to your private parts with how you use the bathroom and how you clothe and all this type of thing. So you can say to them like, well, you'll understand when you're older, but I'll tell you it involves your private parts. Now, depending on the age too, the kid, you know, and the disposition of the kid, a lot of times kids they might say like, ew, or something like what is that? You know, and you can just let that be. You can just let that be. But the point you can reemphasize is that this is part of why we protect those things, not just with our clothing and with our bodies, but also with how we act and with the words that we say. You know, you can relate to the child the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says Jannah is guaranteed for Jannah is guaranteed for whoever guards the chastity of his tongue and his private parts. And you know, you can say to them, you can project onto them at this time that as you go through life, you're really going to learn just how true that is, or the wisdom behind that. And then as things are coming up in life that pertain to sex or pertain to this and that, or these rainbows we see or whatever, now you've set a framework of understanding within the child already of how they can interpret those things. So from a young age, they can learn to identify the people who don't guard their tongues with this type of thing, and the people who don't guard their private parts with this, and the people who don't observe the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the negative effects that have by not doing this in the proper way. This foundation is important to illustrate. So inshallah, on my course, you know, I'll try to draw this out a little more specific, prepare some materials, you know, do some better modeling of it for people, because I understand people, you know, they need maybe exact modeling with this. You know, a lot of people, their parents were too nervous to talk to them about this, but then they find when they are parents themselves, they are also too nervous to talk about it because they never had their parents talk about it, etc. I understand that problem very well. You know, again, as far as being honest with your kids and being a role model for your kids, you know, a lot of people, they get insecure when they hear that because everyone knows their own imperfections very, very well. So it's like, I have to be a model for my kid, but, you know, I have so many deficiencies. So you feel like you're failing. You know, what you want to model for your kid, being a self-reflective person, being a self-aware person. So it is okay to say to your kids, you know, my parents did not talk to me about it. I don't talk to you about it because I know it's important, you know, even though it's more uncomfortable for me. You know, another thing too, like with these conversations, you want to stay calm with kids. You know, people, they feel so strongly about this. They get stressed with this. I'll talk a lot about this in my course, the importance of staying calm with kids and how kids are so much more receptive to an adult who is calm versus one who is all worked up and not operating on your stress reactions, this type of thing with kids. That is such a huge thing for them to build trust with you.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Dr. Weiss, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, subhanAllah, Jazakallah khair, Akhi Michael. I think we could probably do quite a few episodes on this parenting and how to kind of communicate. I think I always go back to Quran and Sunnah, like you mentioned, and the importance of ilm, because what I find in most of cases that I'm referred is that unfortunately the parents are far away from the Deen. They're not practicing, generally speaking, and their knowledge is very weak when it comes to the Deen. They put an emphasis on the dunya. They want their children to be, doctors, lawyers, engineers, but they have no clue about kind of Islamic knowledge. Or they may have a token, a weekly class or whatever, and that kind of satisfies the family. But then when kind of the crisis hits, then they reflect, subhanallah. So I think as well as talking to parents about how to communicate, I think it's really important that we emphasize the importance of them engaging with Islamic knowledge and getting the basics of Aqidah and imparting that to their children. The other thing is also is what parents would probably be surprised is that children know a lot more than parents think, because we live in an age where every information is accessible at the tip of your fingers. So all these uncomfortable conversations, the kids have already got that knowledge from elsewhere. So it's kind of that it's parents feeling uncomfortable. They need to get over that and have an open communication with their children. And again, the other thing is also peers. Like, be vigilant about who your children are spending time with. Who are their friends? Are their friends? Because I think parents tend to kind of just be reassured that okay, they're out with their friends or whatever, but they don't know anything about the friendship group, whether they're Muslim, non-Muslim, whether they're practicing, non-practicing, because that's more important than what the home environment is, because they spend most of their time in education or whatever, in social aspects with friends. So we have to be much more vigilant about the friends that they associate with, because peers are responsible. For example, substance use, one of the commonest reasons that people start using drugs is because their friends are doing it and they get peer pressure, and they end up doing it, even though they might come from practicing families. The other thing is also like zina. Zina is also, a lot of these guys have girlfriends or boyfriends, the sisters, and then the odd one out is the one who doesn't, and then they end up, kind of falling prey to the peer pressure. So that's really important.
Now, barakallah fikum. Let's take some questions, inshallah. We're discussing again, brothers and sisters, the importance of communicating to your children and how to actually open up the discussion on some of these taboo issues, such as LGBTQ, such as pornography, masturbation, relationships, and so on. There's a question there on the screen for you, Dr. Abu Isa, saying, I do not believe in mental health. It's not real. People are just weak minded. Do you want to address that?
SubhanAllah, where do I start, Gabriel? I think we've addressed this multiple
Yeah,
times in these episodes. Mental illness is real. There's evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that it's real. For example, the pen is lifted from the one who is Majnoon, who doesn't have is not corpus mentis, right? So we mentioned how the Prophet ﷺ was affected by black magic, how Am al-Hazan, the year of depression, when he lost his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and uncle. So yeah, it exists. I think maybe it's probably we can have more discussion about this.
right.
Um, it's a shame that people believe in orthopedic surgeons if you break your bones, if you break your hand, but people don't believe in mental illness if your mind isn't working properly.
No. Question here, brother Michael. Ash2408 says, in Germany, you can't even open your mouth for pushing these agendas in school. Um, is there a difference between different like countries in terms of policies and what can be said? Are you allowed in America, for example, to abstain from, for example, Pride Month? I've heard that in the UK, you are allowed to pull your child out from religious studies, but you're not allowed to pull them out from
Mm.
LGBTQ propaganda. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely different policies for different countries. In the United States, there's different policies per state. In the United States, education is local first, it's not federal. And even in the United States too, there's some differences based on the circuit court district, which is something people are even less familiar about. Now, like if you're in a place, if you know, I know some of these European countries are very just statist and extreme with that, and you know, they want to indoctrinate everyone through the state system. That makes talking to kids at a young age about these things even more important, because you're going to have to prepare them in some way to know how to interpret what they're seeing before they see it. That is the best thing, so they can see that and say, oh, this is what mom and dad were talking about. You know, so going back to the open communication, having you know, daily routines with kids where you talk and making them comfortable talking to you about what's going on day to day. It's a whole other thing. I'll go into my course, how to get kids talking about the school day and stuff around the dinner table. In the United States, you know, parents have a lot of rights in the United States, more than Muslims imagine they do. You know, if you know, the United States has a it has a very high litigation and liability culture. So people are very afraid of getting sued in the United States. So if you let schools know beforehand that you want to be notified before they receive any mental health services, or you want to be notified before they undergo any type of sex education, or they have any education in any class that has to do with sexual diversity or anything like that, and even you could add something to that you believe that would be a traumatizing experience for your kid. And I think that this is an argument that we can start making a little bit in these schools, that for some of our kids, based on their cultural background, it would be traumatizing for them to undergo some of this stuff in school. And sometimes that has happened, to be honest. So, you know, if you're proactive about that, you have the rights you generally have the rights to withdraw kids from things in the United States and to be notified in advance, and that type of thing. That, you know, you shouldn't be shy about that if you're really so concerned with it. Now, also in the United States schools, and I'm going to give a plug for my materials here, even better is to educate people proactive, because everything's better when it's proactive versus reactive. And everyone is so afraid of everything with us being Muslims in here. Part of that is because we're only ever reacting to when there's a problem, and we're only ever reacting to when there's some type of conflict. We have to educate people about the society in a comprehensive way, where people are put through a learning continuum, where things are placed in the right order for them to learn about. This is the major reason why I put my book and my training materials together, so we can start doing that with these public education systems. So please refer them to that. So that way you can have a discussion about this issue where they already understand what Islam is, and they already understand the permanence of Islam and how it's not subject to just our own individual interpretations. Because when you get into this conversation with people in a conflict way, or where that issue is the first thing you're talking about, people in the West, that's where they're going to want to go. Well, you need to change your opinion about that, because don't you know these are nice people and all that type of thing and all that. You have to have learning in place for them, so that you're having the conversation on a certain platform that is going to be productive. So we need to proactively educate people about Islam, and also that type of advocacy within the schools. That is a way you can have actions that show your child that you are trying to externalize your Islam and externalize knowledge of Islam to people in the society. Even if you just send them an email referring them to the book of resources, you let your kid know that you made that effort. That can go a big way, because again, the actions that adults all over the West, especially of Muslim parents, are telling kids is that you just, Islam's really just something that we hide over in this corner here. Okay, we do the motions in the masjid. Inshallah, we do it at home too. But outside, we completely hide ourselves. We give in to people's comfort all over the place. So so the kids see that, and then they formulate their own ways of doing the same thing when they're in their adolescence. And a lot of that they will easily interpret as, well, okay, so I want to partner with these people, or I want to, I'm gonna, all the stuff that that is done to our kids in the education system.
Right.
Michael, just I wanted to add something. Jazakallah khair for those points. One thing that I think gets missed, I don't know if you see it in the United States, but in the UK, definitely, the biggest enemy of practicing Muslims are other Muslims who consider themselves moderate Muslims or secular Muslims. So, like, even if you try and hold on to your identity as a practicing Muslim on Quran and Sunnah, and you impart that to your children, the complaints come not from non-Muslims, but other Muslim parents. Subhanallah, So I don't know if you see that in the US, but definitely in the UK. I give an example. My son Isa, when he was studying in a private school in Manchester, they had music lessons. So I wrote to the school. I said, look, I don't want him to be engaging in music lessons because we're practicing Muslims. And the head teacher rang me and said, look, we have at least another 100 Muslim parents, and you're the first person who's actually objected to your
Right.
your son getting,
Listen.
doing a music
Look, look,
lesson.
look.
And so, this is an issue.
Okay. Look. Yeah, this is another issue we need to solve. Okay, probably have that problem worse in the West. Now, look
Yeah.
again. In my book, in my training program, I talk a lot about capitulation that Muslims do, and how the societal and psychological pressure of trying to practice Islam and adhere to all these things when you're constantly in environments where people don't know about it, it has a psychological stress on people. And the reality is, the average person is not someone who goes against the social grain. The average person is someone who goes with the social grain because that's the path of least resistance. So what happens with a lot of Muslims is they get overwhelmed by that, and psychologically they've affixed themselves to just getting used to giving in. Now, I understand people have anger towards liberal Muslims and this type of thing. I get that. I have had lots of interactions with liberal Muslims working in a major public school district because they're the ones more likely to be in the public school system. I'm rare in that respect as a Muslim being in it. A lot of them, I honestly believe, trying to put the best intentions on them, I honestly believe they would practice Islam more if it was made easier for them. But they just don't see the path how. So as Muslims who want to adhere to the Quran and the Sunnah, and we want to practice it in the authentic way based on the texts, we have to take it upon ourselves to try to be educating people. And again, so this whole issue of capitulation and this dual complex that we have as Muslims also, that's part of what starts to happen with people. They get into a dual personality complex where, you're a Muslim in your cultural spaces or whatever, but when you go out, you have to put a whole other face on. And it becomes higher leverage, especially as kids get older and into their 20s and stuff, that you can't switch so easily anymore. So you have to choose either to isolate yourself or you're going to choose the outside personality, because that's going to get you farther into society. We have to start unraveling these things for people, and we have to be educating the people in these places who control the environments that we're in. And that begins with the public school system. Now, again, and I don't know the total situation. I'm not trying to talk about your situation specifically. I talked to another brother who was in Medina. His kids were in the UK, and he had this issue come up with celebrating Diwali and this type of thing in the school. They want the kids celebrating Diwali. It's always problematic when we start from a point of conflict with people talking, or where a clash comes up. People are always defensive automatically with that. So, we start approaching these things when, the kid got assigned to music class, we got to do something. They're going to have the Christmas party, we got to do something now. And parents eventually give it. They give up on that stuff. And even not thinking about just for that school, but thinking about it as a longer term educational project. If we're proactively educating these schools, then they will understand in advance that advanced considerations need to be made for this. A lot of times people, when schools react that way, it's because you've put them in a box now. Okay, it's hard to make special accommodations on the spot in a school that you're not pre-prepared for. So if you're asking to pull the kid out of music class now, well, what do I do with him on the side? And that's just too much stressful for us. That's too much stress for us to deal with this week. So we're going to do something that tries to put it off to the side. That's how a lot of that stuff happens. But if they had undergone an educational program that made them understand the importance of that a few months beforehand, well, now they can start planning ahead. And this is the type of thing that we have to try to get to with people. This is the real work that needs to be done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, just to add, because what I find is that actually the other Muslim parents, they will label you as an extremist and say, look, so I think there is a cohort of parents that you're talking about who kind of go with the flow, but then there's actually a vitriolic group of other parents who really do believe in a liberal form of Islam. So like now, you'd be surprised, I don't know if Gabriel, if you come across parents are telling their children that there's nothing wrong with homosexuality and Islam is compatible with same-sex attraction.
It's not just the
And
parents, brother. It's also, it seems now that there's some community leaders and even some so-called
compassionate imams.
Yeah, compassionate moms. Yeah.
Look.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, at the end of the day, we can complain about this
Yeah.
stuff all day long. If our
No,
kids are in an
it's just
environment,
highlighting it. It's just highlighting it because
I know,
it's
I know.
not black and white. Yeah.
But look. Okay, whether or not Islam does accept or teach those things, it can be objectively proven that it doesn't. It can be objectively proven. Okay, some of these
Mm.
Muslim families that you've given up so much, and they're so psychologically and emotionally attached to that position they've taken on that they're not going to let go of it. Okay, fine. But the non-Muslims who control the environment, there is a way we can educate them properly to show them that objectively those things are not accepted in Islam, and the proper way you're supposed to practice Islam doesn't allow us to do that. That can be done if
Yeah.
they're put through a proper learning continuum, and that's what we have to try to do. And again, the thing is, too, educating the school systems in these places, that will affect in turn the professional atmospheres down the road. Because if the schools can start making more proper accommodations and have a more proper understanding, then that will resonate too to even the non-Muslim kids who are in those places, and they will say, "Oh, you have Muslims in this environment. Oh, you need a separate place for them to go for music class. They don't like music. You need a place for them to pray. You need a place for them to wash." And then when they get down the road, generation down the road, when they are in the professional places, they will know better how to make those accommodations, that type of stuff. This is how certainly how American society works.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Abdurrahman is saying, what if you're uncomfortable with physical touch with your children? Not that you don't love them, but it's just something you're not comfortable with. I think that's within the
Mm.
context of um, obviously proximity and touching your children in the right sense, giving them love and physical affection is it's part and parcel of growing up, of childhood, of parenting, a proper parenting. The Prophet ﷺ would kiss Al Hassan al Hussein,
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
and
Yeah.
he told that man who was somehow surprised by that event that, look, what can I do if Allah has removed from your heart this mercy?
Yeah.
What's the importance of having this proximity and physical touch with children, and how do we even open up to them and discussing what's not appropriate in terms of touching? A lot of the children at school do touch each other. One of the first signs of abuse is when a child, and maybe, I'm sure Brother Michael can can confirm this, but one of the things we learn in Teachers College is that you look for children touching other children. That's one of the first signs of them being abusive, maybe have suffered abuse, is that they will do that to other children. They'll touch them in an inappropriate way, in a sexual way. So how do we draw the line? How do we discuss this? How do we open this subject? And how does a parent who might not feel so comfortable with physical touch teach a child what is acceptable and what is not?
Good question. What I think is important is the way we behave is usually shaped by our own childhood. So I don't know if Abdurrahman, what her own childhood was like growing up, whether there was a lack of, kind of compassion in the sense of physical touch. So when we grow up as adults, and again, this goes back to the importance of attachment. So in mental health terms, we talk about secure attachment with the primary caregiver, which is usually the mother, and really making sure that you impart love and compassion, and provide a nurturing environment where physical touch is obviously very important. There's a lot of biological processes and neurochemical processes that take place when a child is hugged by a parent, and that improves the connection or the attachment with the primary caregiver. So if that was kind of missing in your own childhood, I guess that would be transferred into your children when you become a parent. It's again, I think the common theme is like parents feeling uncomfortable. We have to get over feeling uncomfortable, because if we are not feeling comfortable, if our children don't feel comfortable within the home environment, then they're going to be influenced by negative forces outside. So I think that's kind of really important. It's again proactive parenting. We keep saying the same thing. When the children are young, it's much easier to develop that relationship. When you have a 14, 16-year-old boy, son, or even a daughter, and then you try and impart or implement these strategies, it's kind of a bit too late, or it becomes more challenging.
No.
To answer your second question about raising awareness about inappropriately touching. So I attended a recent conference here in Doha, which was I was really impressed. So they've created a robot. Actually, a child created a robot, which when you touch it in, like, say, if you touch the face or touch the hand, it says, it gives a positive response, like I'm your friend. But if you touch it in an inappropriate place, it's this is my body, don't touch me. That robot can be a good learning tool for our children. So again, we can use those strategies. Again, it's just opening conversations with children, because we feel uncomfortable, but they need to be aware how to keep themselves safe from abuse.
100%.
Brother Michael, anything to add to that?
You guys, you were freezing a little bit on me. I'm not sure if did you. I think you were about to go into the narration of the Prophet ﷺ, where he told the Bedouin who had, I believe he had 10 children, and he told the Prophet that he'd never kissed any of them. And the Prophet ﷺ, if I recall correctly, he said, Allah will not have mercy to the man who does not have mercy on his children. So, I mean, and I understand exactly what Abu Isa is saying. This is what I've seen too, like, these cold interactions, these cultural, which are culture. It's culturally these cold interactions from parents to kid, to like a lot of the cultural things with parenting. It's excuse making. It's excuse making to tell yourself you can do things an easy way. Just be tough on the kids only, and that's gonna shape them somehow. They're gonna fight through it and figure out like the tough way to be or something like that. That type of thing. A lot of it's excuse making to not actually do the work that whole cultures get into, in my opinion, and certainly away from the Quran and the Sunnah. So I think the sister needs to reflect on that a little bit. I say too, like if you have that issue with the child, I'm guessing that it's probably an older child, like you're a 2, 3, 4-year-old. They're probably talking like a 9, 10-year-old. And it is the case that once kids start getting to that prepubescent, pubescent age, that if you haven't had affection routines with them from the time they were young and kept them going consistently up to that point, it is going to be hard to build them. And they're going to be resistant to any little bit of it. That is true. Now, what I would suggest to the sister is you can say to a kid who is about that age, you can have a talk with them where you express some regret about that. You realize that you wish that you should have held them, you should have kissed them more as they're growing up. And you can say to that child, I want you to know that I love you very, very much. And when I think back on it, maybe I haven't done the best in always showing that, but I want you to know that. And I haven't hugged you enough. I wish that we could more. You might be surprised what you get back from children when you open up like that. Like a lot of times you might have this tension in the relationship that they are awaiting that both you and them are awaiting some release from. And like a sentimental moment like that can instigate some of that release, and you might feel so emotional in having that conversation that maybe you feel like you want to cry during it. I say, go ahead and cry. That's not going to make you weak in the eyes of your child. Again, it's going to make them empathize with you. It's going to make them realize that you are a human being just like them. And it's going to make them feel something for you. And I think that that's something that needs to happen between family members in order to start turning things around when they haven't gone the right way for a long time.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add, Gabriel, sorry. The other thing is we're talking about how to have conversations with our children. I think it's really important to identify an activity which the children enjoy, and we can do it together as a parent and child. So it's not just about sitting at the dinner table and asking, okay, how was your day, and forcing them to talk. With fathers and sons, maybe go and play a sport, football, cricket, whatever. Go out outdoor hiking. The mother and the daughter can go shopping, and that is an opportunity then to reduce the expressed emotions and kind of lower the stress levels, and then that is an opportunistic way to talk to your children. But yeah, forcing them to sit down and talk, it doesn't work, and we see that all the time. We have to be creative.
Let's take the last question, as we usually try to keep our podcast.
Yeah, but look. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say, sorry, I know we can go back and forth. I will say, though, to me, a dinner routine every day is very important. And I know some cultures have it where the kids are just completely silent during dinner or whatever. I get that. But again, you have different considerations in the modern times. Something I'm going to go over in my course is how you get kids to start going in that conversation. A lot of you people who don't have I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Abu, sir, but I have a lot of experience getting kids to talk in classrooms. I have a lot of experience, and kids who have a lot of anxiety and insecurity about it with language issues and that. There is a way to build kids up to that and to get them comfortable doing that, but the day-to-day consistency of having the routine in there, of having dinner together is important. And then building them up slowly to do that. It's an important thing. And especially for the young parents out there, I want them to understand the importance of this.
MashaAllah, it's a very good point. It's a very good point. It's something that,
and I'm not saying it replaces any of that fun stuff, like fun is all. I think your brother, who is all very important as well. But there's these daily routines are important.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. This is something that we see with today's society, all over the world. Pretty much, it's a global issue where families are not talking to each other. They are, sitting at the table. Maybe if they're sitting at the table, they are looking at their phones. They're checking their messages. They are sharing social media posts, and they're not talking to each other. Forget about talking to each other. I mean, even just bringing the family together, sitting in one place, is a very challenging thing today with the way society is structured, the way our lives are structured, jobs, you name it. And that's something that parents need to identify, need to rectify. As Brother Michael has said, we need to offer a platform or a situation in which our children can have the opportunity to open up. The dinner table is a great, it's not just that you sit down and have dinner, but the parents have to prime and to start the conversation. It has to be something that they themselves work towards. I don't expect your child to just open up, especially if you are just starting to have this kind of routine. If you've built it from the beginning and it's something embedded into your family routine and practices, then yeah, definitely that might be it might be easier for them to open up. But if you just maybe listen to our podcast and all of a sudden say, oh, that's a great idea, let me have dinner tonight with everyone, don't think that, oh, well, my child didn't open up, he didn't talk about anything. No, you have to trigger them to open up. You have to give them hooks. You have to hook them into the discussion, and hopefully they'll open up. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a week, but inshallah, if you consistently do this, maybe within some 2 weeks, a month or so, they'll start opening up, and you'll start seeing some results, inshallah. We are running out of time, but I do want to take this last question because I think it's very important. It's kind of what we started with and what we're ending with. And Brother, the path to you says, Ustaz, my 12-year-old daughter secretly started identifying as gay. She lives with her divorced mother and brother. When confronted, she started hurting herself to the point we needed therapy, help. Again, this is 12-year-old. I'm not sure the background, but you can see a divorced family, divorced mother and father. Probably lack of parenting, most likely peers influencing her turning towards peers for support and direction and guidance, maybe in a very tough time, such as a divorce between the parents. And I just have to keep reiterating the fact that this is increasingly happening more and more. The incident rates of young boys and girls identifying as gay, bisexual, are just alarming. They're alarming. And the only way we can counter this is through preemptive education, through proactive parenting, as we've been saying. Talk to your children. Like, how do you talk to them about this? They're going to go to school. They might ask you. If they don't ask you, you bring it about. What's this flag? What's this word gay? Why are children, people are coming, home, students are coming home, children are coming home saying, well, my friend at school is identifying as a girl. Explain to them, talk to them, educate them. Don't shy away from things. A lot of people react by saying, "Oh, it's haram. It's just haram. This is from the devil." Rationalize things to them. Give them evidence. Children understand. Don't think that they're dumb and they cannot understand. They will understand if you have the patience and you approach it with a calm, composed way. They will understand. Don't suppose they're not going to understand. Explain to them. Show them the negative aspects of this type of culture and how it's progressed and how it's really taken over, so they themselves will be able to build their own understanding of this problem. And when you're not there, they'll be able to fight it off and they'll be able to stay away from it.
Yeah, subhanallah. Just I think that's really important. The other thing is also it's like, for example, my own experience. We've got a couple of brothers who have teenage boys. So what we do is maybe every 2 or 3 weeks we take the boys out for dinner, and then that's an opportunity for us as fathers and sons. They're all friends to talk about many things. Kind of things that are happening in the culture, things that are happening around us from an Islamic perspective, talk about the Sahaba, talk about the Quran and Sunnah. So these are things that they benefit from because they're in an environment where they've got friends and their parents, friends as well. So that is a tip that I think if you have that, that's really helpful. The other thing is also now what I found, Gabriel and Michael, is that it's become like a fad or a fashion to say I identify as gay or I identify as transgender. And I usually find that if you kind of dig deeper, the kids, they don't actually know what they're saying. They're just saying it to fit in with the environment around them,
That's a very good
to
observation.
satisfy the peers.
There,
So yeah,
there,
so I think that's really important. Yeah.
here in
Sorry, go on, Michael.
America, here in America, there's a well-known survey that says 1 in 5 Gen Z kids is identified in one of these ways. However, 15% of that was kids saying they identify as bisexual. And the vast majority of people who identify as bisexual end up with a heterosexual partner later in life. So,
Yeah.
but there's also other surveying evidence that has shown that actually there's a higher percentage of Gen Z compared to millennials and baby boomers and Gen X who are intolerant of the LGBT movement and want to go away. There is some surveying that shows that as well. So there's different currents taking place. There's different currents taking place. Too. I'll talk a little bit about my course. Young people don't want to be manipulated. There's so many forces trying to manipulate them, and they don't want to be. So there is ways to talk to them to make them understand that a lot of this stuff is coming about as a way to manipulate them. And again, we have to plant the seeds early, this type of thing. These types of situations, like with the 14-year-old girl, this is at that age, kids, they're either going to be attached to their parents as their primary go-to people and be navigating their peer culture through reliance on their parents, or they are going to be oriented towards their peers and trying to get their emotional validation through their peers and hiding what's going on from their parents for the most part. I mean, that type of thing is a clear case of someone who was overly in on being peer oriented. And peer culture and adolescent culture, it's very cruel and it's very superficial. And so not self-harm is often a product of not getting validation in that culture from someone who was too far into seeking validation from it. So, the roots of that problem were laid a very long time ago, and I tell people too, whenever these big problems come up, totally repairing them, you're playing a long game. You're playing the long game. You cannot ever wish that's going to turn around. But key to it is going to be trying to rebuild a connection that was lost somewhere. And and for the kids too, if they're identifying this way and they're all, happy about it and proud of it, there's a good chance that seeking that out as their place of emotional validation, I do believe it's a product of the parents having not provided that themselves well enough leading up to that. But there's a good chance that down the road, it's going to let them down. It will let them down. And then you have to be there to recuperate that when that happens and not have everything destroyed in the meantime. Life is full of phases. People go through many different phases in life. That's known in psychology. That's known in neurological developments. Some people, they're going to go through crises all the way when they get to middle age of these different routes they've gone down, and they're going to realize that it left them empty, it left them with nothing. So some people, they're going to be primed to come back to the deen at that time. And, as the Muslim community, we have to be thinking about all these things, making considerations with people close to us of how we're going to be able to receive them and reconnect with them at these different points.
Yeah, Gabriel, proactive parenting. Just I really want to advocate. Parents need to teach their children about the stories of the prophets. We mentioned Yusuf alayhi salam about trauma. We mentioned Ayub alayhi salam about patience, sabr, and Lut alayhi salam. We need to teach our children what happened, what is the story about Lut alayhi salam and his people, so that they know what is right and what is wrong, what is halal and what is haram from a young age. You can start talking to your kids when they're 5-6 years old about Lut alayhi salam and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished the people of Lut. And if that information is imparted at a young age, inshallah, that will help them navigate through these turbulent waters that we're living through.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Barakallahu feekum, brothers. That was an amazing podcast. I think we need to continue with this topic. There's so many questions that are coming through, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more once this is posted up. My brother Michael Abraham, Jazakallah khair for being with us today again, guys. Please check out his course that's on right now, his book, mashallah, that I've had a chance to look at. You can see all his social media we posted, inshallah. Please support this work, share the video, and we will be back again bi'idhnillahi ta'ala next week. We might bring back brother Michael in one of our future podcasts, probably very soon, inshallah, to keep discussing this topic. There's a lot more to be talked about when it comes to education, mental health. There's a great intersection there when it comes to preemptive measures, educating our children about the dangers of these challenging times, of the propaganda that's being pushed on, and how that affects them in their adulthood, and how it affects their mental health, how it affects their performance as Muslims in this dunya, in this world, in this ummah, to be productive citizens of this ummah, inshallah. So we're going to continue talking about these very important issues. Please keep sending your questions in, and keep supporting our podcast and share it with everyone. Inshallah, we'll be back next week. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum, Dr. Abu Isa. As always, a pleasure. Brother Michael Abraham. Jazakallah khair to all the brothers and sisters who watch this podcast.
Wa yak. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.